D.B Cooper is a white male in his mid-40s who hijacked a plane on its way to Seattle. He bought a plane ticket and boarded a Boeing 727 on November 24, 1971. Once the plane took off, he demanded $200,000 and parachutes using a bomb to motivate the flight attendants. When he got what he requested, he allowed the plane to land in Seattle and other passengers were allowed off. He then again demanded to be flown to New Mexico, but he would jump from this plane somewhere in the middle during a thunderstorm at night. Since this day, he has never been found or charged, yet the theories on who it could be still wander. I chose this topic because it's interesting and I wanted something that would keep me on my toes. This case definitely did. Cooper's story was one of a kind, which only drew me in more. One of the first things that comes up when you Google D.B Cooper is that this case is the only air piracy case unsolved, and that is just so entertaining to dive into. Before I began my research, I didn't know much about the case. I like to think of it as a rumor that goes around. You only know bits and pieces of it, and you don't actually know if it's true or false or some folk tale. I knew the basics. D.B Cooper was his name, and that he robbed a plane and somehow was never caught. The research I conducted after my initial thoughts was quite a lot. Since I didn't know too much, I had to really educate myself here. First, I researched the full story just to understand what exactly went down and the order of it. Then, I began looking deeper into the three main suspects, which were Walter Recca, Robert Rackstraw, and Kenneth Christensen. With the theories of these suspects, it brought up the theory of a potential FBI cover-up, so I looked into that as well. Lastly, I researched the science behind the case, such as what the scientists and geologists discovered and the money that was found years later after the crime. I evaluated my sources in a few different ways. First, I would find a source that seemed catered to what I needed, then I would read it through and confirm that it applied to what I was talking about. I made sure not to cite sources like Wikipedia. I also looked at the dates the articles were published to verify it applied to the point I was making. For example, if the source was in 1971 and I was talking about a recent D.B Cooper event, it would not make much sense to apply it there. Finally, I made sure all of my sources were saying the same thing. Obviously not with the deferring suspect stories and things like that, but for the general story. I wanted to make sure every source was giving me the correct information, but also that they express an understanding of the story as a whole. The conclusions I've drawn about this case are the typical ones. When looking at the evidence that was collected, it was most likely that Walter Recca was the culprit. He confessed to this crime, on tape and all, to a dear friend named Carl Lauren, and his only request was that Lauren did not tell authorities until after Recca's death. Recca died in 2014, and Lauren went to the authorities. Despite what you'd think, not much was done. Since so many others had come forward claiming they were Cooper, they could not take Recca's confession as the only evidence. They looked farther into Recca's story but never found enough evidence to prove him beyond a reasonable doubt. The reason that I and so many others believe this is the person responsible is because of the confession, but also a witness who gave Cooper a ride in the same area that Lauren said Recca jumped to. This witness, however, said the man who got the ride looked nothing like the sketches that were being posted everywhere for D.B Cooper. Recca could easily be the D.B Cooper, but who really knows? Only Cooper himself.